Hi, this is Dan Per2, and for the next episode in my Muse in Music video blog, I am super excited to be talking with Carlos Izcaray, the music director of the Alabama Symphony Orchestra. Maestro Izcaray has shown special interest and prowess in tackling some of the most complex scores in the symphonic repertoire, while also championing a historically informed approach in his interpretations. He has guest conducted the Pacific, St. Louis, North Carolina, Grand Rapids, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Fort Worth symphonies, as well as many orchestras in Europe, South America, and elsewhere. He has also conducted opera engagements in St. Louis, Utah, Omaha, and beyond. In addition to his professional engagements, he is a strong supporter of younger generations, having worked extensively with El Sistema in Venezuela, as well as the London School Symphony Orchestra, among many other educational organizations. Please join me as I talk with Carlos about what he finds to be inspiring about his work as a conductor, particularly as it pertains to the music of the present day. Well, I'm really excited to be talking with Carlos Izcaray now, and we're going to talk about inspiration in the field of music. And I just wanted to start with a question I'd like to ask for all of my guests, really. So what inspires you about your work as a conductor, as a music director? Why do you love doing what you do?
Well, hi, Daniel. It's great to be here on your space. Thank you for inviting me. Well, that's quite the question to start with. But perhaps the most important question that a musician can ask themselves: the what inspires me? Wow, I mean, the music has so many dimensions, so many layers. I mean, I'll go with just the fact that it's just a fun activity. I've had a great deal of fun with music since my early years. When I was a chorister, then I was I was a violinist, a cellist, and all the different versions, and through all the stages up until now, there has always been some degree of fun. I love the substance of music since I was a kid, that tingly feeling behind the neck that inspires some emotion, or the drive of music, the rhythmic stuff. There's the movement. I love moving. I'm a fidgety guy since I was a kid. I'm like restless. And I've always liked the fact that this is a physical activity as much as a deep, like a challenging mental activity as well. And then and for the most part, um, in any capacity, as a performer, conductor, or composer, educator, you're dealing with people at the end of the process. And I just think that's part of the human experience, is to connect with others one way or another, and that inspires me. Yeah, I look forward to concerts. I look forward to rehearsals. I look forward to being able to sit down and create something, or to study someone else's work. I love grabbing my any of my instruments, and just fiddle around with them, and play with chords and see what comes up. I mean, they're just all those things are inspiring. And I would say also that when you do this long enough, you also start to collaborate quite a bit with not just other great artists, other minds, other people who are going through their own process, and you're learning, but I goes also with other art forms. I mean, I love doing opera, for example, when I have a chance, because there's a stage director, so there you go. So we're dealing with the drama and the theater arts, and then I love the spatial uh, things one has to deal with when you're dealing with stage. And so stage design, stage direction. I love what we do. So you're interacting with a lot of people. I'm even inspired which might seem weird, but like even the interaction with those who are sort of behind the machine, the funders, different stakeholders, the audience. I love talking to audience and see what their thoughts are, what inspires them, and that inspires me.
Mm. So multidimensional here. I mean, you're bringing up, your work not just in the orchestra scene, but also with opera, with staging, with and you mentioned also the different aspects of creation and music composition or whatever. And in particular, if we could turn to the music side of things, what music in particular do you find particularly inspiring? Whether it's old music or new music, what really, gives you that sense of chills and the emotional and dramatic impact that I think we all seek?
Well, I think all great music of any background, genre, whatever has something. It has normally tends to have a really good balance of delivering um, some sort of emotional content, and but at the same time, it's not something that I expect. If I go to a concert, I want to hear something, and most likely, the pleasure of beautiful sounds, or challenging sounds, emotional things. I like music that on one end invites me because there's some sort of familiarity, but at the same time, I like music that challenges me, that goes somewhere where I did not expect that. I love that kind of thrill, like anything. When I go on a path, and just like a roller coaster. That's the whole that kind of feel of being taken somewhere, and that can go. It's really it doesn't matter what genre it is. Any great song, folk song from the past, or the latest hit. Um, I think that's what gets me with music. I mean, it's just like my. It's a little bit old school. I like good music. That's it. I mean, it's just if it's good, if it moves me, if it makes me want to dance, if it makes me want to cry, if it makes me want to think or reflect or just relax. Yeah, I don't tend to like the kind of music that you can kind of predict in a second, and you don't have to be a music expert theoretician. You don't have to know. You don't even have to be musically literate. I mean, nobody likes sort of like the having the same thing repeated over and over. Like it's just unsustainable with just about anything. That's why we have different words, right? We don't use the same
Yeah.
word every time. We use synonyms to keep a lecture interesting. So it's the same thing with music.
Yeah, and so with it cuts across genres you're talking about. So all different kinds of music. It cuts across time. So it's a balance, you said, between both perhaps familiar or beautiful sounds, but something that is also challenging. Are there any composers in particular that you think, maybe even contemporary composers, or more recent composers, or even earlier, it doesn't matter, but are there composers who walk that balance, you think, particularly well, that particularly seem to get it when it comes to both keeping things familiar to a degree, but then also challenging the listener in a really exciting way?
Well, well, I actually think that basically all 90 plus of the great composers that won studies from now to the to the times of Monteverdi, and before that to the times of Hildegard from Bingen, it doesn't matter. All of them have that to some degree. It's a there's obviously a little balance here, but it's like great master chefs. That they all have that ability to deliver on some great palatable, tasty food, but with something that it's like, oh wow, I mean, so there's some sort of individuality within that familiarity. All of them have that. I do go. I know I'm not alone in saying that. I mean, Johann Sebastian Bach. It's a great example of balance, of craft, emotion, um, emotional range too.
Mm.
And it's just there's something sort of in the science of the music in his thing, but from one end, but also you can just listen to it freshly and that sort of thing. Bach is a good example of what I would say perfectly balanced creator. There are others too. I mean, Debussy, the way he introduces sort of modal sounds and textures and creates a sound world that kind of sort of in a way gives birth to 20th century sound exploration through our medium. And I mean, really with regards to the balance, I just think that's what makes all the great composers great, in the sense that they were able to manifest their raw talent, musical talent, through great craftsmanship. Obviously, some of them are more crafty, more. I love this book I have that shows their calligraphy, their actual their manuscripts, and you could tell, oh man, like Beethoven and Liszt were like, like sort of just scribble on top and let the publisher figure that out. Whereas there are others like Strauss and Boulez and Weber, where they're so like meticulous, so that's. But when it comes to the substance, the musical balance itself, what people are hearing, and I think they all have that. They are able to create tension and then deliver or surprise you, and they're just taking you always on a ride. Some of them take you on a sort of petite ride, like Eric Satie.
Yeah.
Some of them take you on a monster roller coaster, like Mahler or
Yes.
like John Adams or Corigliano. Yeah.
Well, and so you mentioned John Adams or Corigliano. So in sort of with living composers now, those are the two that stand out to you? Or are there others in sort of in the current space that seem to have that amazing sense of balance?
There are so many. Esa-Pekka Salonen is a great maestro, great composer.
Yeah.
I celebrate that today. I just read that he was named a composer in residence for Berlin Philharmonic, which I think is an awesome partnership. I look forward to that. Well, Corigliano and Adams are very important to me because they were two of the ones that I listened to just kind of by accident, I happened to be in the right time. And when I heard their works, I was, what is this? I need more of that right now. It's like, it was, I just remember it clearly. So they came to mind. I think if we're talking about Thomas Addis, like a current composers, there's a young Alabamian composer from Birmingham that I'm working with this year. I've already done a couple of things. Brian Raphael Neighbors, who is now teaching in Louisiana, and he's gonna be the sound investment composer in Alabama, where I am, and his works are very exciting. I mean, I don't know, maybe because I'm studying them now. I just received this new score, and I said, this guy's good. And that's like, it's got everything that I like. There's great sound. There's a sound world that I like. There's it's gonna be the right kind of challenge for the musicians and the audience. I just think it's got humor and emotional depth as well, gravitas. So I like to talk about the younger ones, and the masters also. if Paul Desen is a Venezuelan composer that greatly inspired me too, because he's a great cellist, an educator and performer, and but also writer thinker, and his music is one that I like. As a Venezuelan, I'm Caraqueño from Caracas, and I found that to be inspiring for me.
Sure.
Being a cellist and composer, conductor, and I worked with him quite a. But there's so many, and there are others that I have not yet tackled, and that I'm also. I mean, I was showing someone Caroline Shaw's partita to a friend of mine lately, and as I was showing her, I kept looking at that piece. I was like, man, this is a fantastic work, like a work of genius, So, God, there's so many. It's almost it's too loaded of a question, because you always feel like I'm missing at least 30 people that I found fascinating. Thomas
Sure.
Beatman in Germany, many Mason Bates. There's a lot. There are a lot of great music creators all over the world. Unsuk Chin, another one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you were talking about one thing that I picked up on. You talked about a lot, but one thing I particularly picked up on was the idea of the right kind of challenge for the orchestra or for the audience. Maybe could you talk a little bit about what do you see as the right kind of challenge, so to speak? Maybe starting with the audience, because I'm particularly curious about that. I'm always wondering what how conductors work or think about programming for their audiences, and what maybe the right kind of challenge is.
Yeah, good question. And this is a it's somewhat tough question, because that's one of the debatable things about what is the kind of challenge one. So when it comes to the audience, I actually do consider the physical sensations, purely, like just the the physical sensations. I'm not talking dissonance versus not dissonance. I'm just wondering, if are people gonna go to a concert, and the sound wave that will come at them, towards them, will it generate a repulsion that is more on the physical level than intellectual? So I'm talking just decibels. I'm talking saturation. I think sometimes, like when I myself, for sure, I'm one tries to distill through as I evolve, composing my own stuff as well, but also when I work with others, having too much going at once, and then too much thrown at you. So the challenge from an auditory perspective is to not overwhelm from a sensorial point of view, so that their minds can pick up things that would translate into meaning. So for me, there's this balance between the symbolic and the sort of philosophical one wants to convey musically, but there is the sound, the actual sound, what people are getting, and there are considerations there, I believe, for sure. And I will say this: I mean, there are even, I mean, I mentioned composers that I absolutely just admire so much, but there are. I remember listening once to Corleone's second symphony. Sorry, no, third symphony. For the wind ensemble, and at the end, they had to give a warning to the audience that there was going to be this was at the Aspen Festival. There was a shotgun at the end. It ends with a shotgun, right? And but that's not so much the thing. It was the fact that it was so loud that they had to encourage the audience to go.
Oh my, yes.
And you could hear the rehearsals from the tent. For those who know the Aspen Festival tent, which is kind of one part of side of the town here, you could hear from almost from the campus up the hill. You know, it was so loud. So that kind of balance when it comes to the audience. I also am. I think there's a conversation that that can be had and should be had with creators, in the sense that when one is looking for a musical sort of texture or some sort of it's all, I always encourage composers to not get fixed on the technique itself. Look for the sound, look for what the audience mind is going to pick up. Why do I say that? Because there is a physicality in playing an instrument. So I tend to encourage, I would say that in the majority of time, that one is wanting an instrumentalist or a vocalist, a performer to do one's work, it, to try as much as possible to challenge them in the from an idiomatic perspective with regards to their instrument. So, you know, because we're dealing also with a kind of architecture. I mean, the violin, just to give an example, has the shape it has because there's supposed to be a bow going, you know, sort of near the sides, and that's why it has the little curvature, that hence the bridge. So the 20th century obviously was an era of great technical exploration. I mean, virtuosity had reached a real high level, and so just this sort of looking for different sounds. So extended techniques, I'm all for them. I love it, but it's sort of I still consider that kind of like the spicy element of our of what we make. So kind of taking the culinary parallel.
Yeah.
I don't want the dish to be 70% hot peppers and then, you know, and I like a big blob of like wasabi next to it. I mean, it's just,
oh my God.
Yeah, and then have a little bit of a mashed potato there on the side, you know, like, no, yeah. I mean, I think there's a sort of proportionality that we are learning to adjust to, because that comes with our nature and the nature of our instruments. So that's what I mean by the right kind of challenge. It's the fact that, look, great performers and just anybody who wants to play an instrument, is that just grabbing the instrument, you're already challenging yourself to something. I mean, I could just pick up a recording of whatever and hear something. I mean, and listen to it. So the fact that you're composing it, playing it, or conducting it, or you want some sort of stimulation challenge. And I think, well, let's deliver, because, you know, you went through all those scales, arpeggios, and blah blah blah, and you know, if you're a pianist or whatever, it doesn't matter. Your armature challenge. I mean, try to figure that out. So because they're Olympians. Ultimately, I've discovered that when one considers these things and tries to really master and is honest with oneself and with the performers, they'll take that challenge. They'll go for it because they like it. They're, you know, it's like those people who like to, for some strange reason, they like to mountain climb and to go way for the sole purpose of going at the top of the thing, going, yes, you know, and looking at that great valley. Those are our musicians. That's what they like. They like that kind of challenge.
So, and then taking it then with also the audience, and you were talking about, you know, the physical sound and experience and all that. Sometimes new music can be a tough sell for audiences. Not always, but sometimes it can be. So what do you do as a conductor and music director and someone who is in the leadership role? Do you prepare the audience in some way, or do you talk about the music, or do you just let it speak for itself, or do you program it a certain way, or you look for certain kinds of music that works with your audience? Can you maybe elaborate on that side of it?
Well, the shortest answer to that question is yes to all. I have to say that I do it. I do all those things, depending on the program, depending on the circumstances, depending on many factors. Too long to, but it's just basically, sometimes there is a piece that one is performing, and then yes, it might make sense to go to the audience. I love doing this. I love talking to the audience about what they're about to hear. I think in contemporary society, that is something that is part of the experience too. I mean, when I would think that when somebody went to in Milan in turn of the century to see a Puccini opera, you didn't need the explanation because you don't need an you don't go to a blockbuster movie nowadays, or
Right.
like a decade ago, because there are people don't go that much to movie theaters anymore. But let's take it, a few years back, you wouldn't need that sort of, hey, you're about to hear a film, which is, there's so this is when one is dealing with something that's maybe from a past era, it just those few words contextualizing something, it might make a huge difference for the audience to perceive that work with a new light, and so they're sort of it's like, yeah, so that I do that for sure. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just just listen to that, like you're listening to any kind of music. Now that goes the same with established repertoire also.
Mhm.
There are times that it makes sense to talk about a piece. Why is this work being paired with this other symphony? And there, somebody might see a connection. There's a piece by Carlos Simon that's inspired by like Beethoven. So if you have this Beethoven piece, hence we're doing this. So there are things like that that basically make the overall experience better for more enriching for people.
And so also you're talking about the processes. It's if we go back to the food analogy or metaphor, I mean, there's an art actually to presenting the music too, right? So if you're presenting a certain dish and it's a more complex dish or something, and maybe in the menu there needs to be a little more of an explanation or something going along with it. On the other hand, I mean, there are certain dishes that are amazing, but they do speak for themselves, so to speak. And so yeah, I mean, there's an art to sort of the concert presentation part of things. I've heard and I've been to a lot of different concerts, and there's some conductors or people, concert presenters or whatever, who they always, they sort of have a set way of, they're always presenting it a certain way. But it's nice to have and then there are others who just never talk too, right? There are some conductors who still just they don't talk at all. But it's nice actually to have an experience where you never quite know what's going to happen, but it's actually an artistic presentation. Do you do presentations that involve like multimedia or some other visual aspect or other sensory things that your audience might enjoy in addition to just the sound, for example?
Yeah, there are. I mean, I would say I have done some, and I wish to do more and to create more again, because for me they're tied. Performing and composing for me are and playing. I mean, they're all one. I can't say that. I mean, obviously, conducting, being a music director, that's the bulk of my time. But my brain it's a sort of it goes on all those different modes. Um, so perhaps I don't know if it's because where I studied or I had, I mean, so much interaction with people from other fields of the arts, and not just the arts, which then, yeah, I like the immersive elements of what we do, and I think that multimedia. I mean, I consider opera kind of like the first of that's what it is. I mean, it was
Yes.
before electricity. That's it. I mean, before the certain industrial processes that had not evolved yet, and then like the metallic and that kind of thing, and plastics. When that comes, then you have electric guitars and whatnot, synthesizers. But ultimately, Yeah, I mean, and I think it's 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 something that is just as has enhanced. I mean, we have a bigger toolkit now to work with, and not. I mean, that also we're talking right now just about like kind of like the immersion within the cave. I call it the cave because that's another thing. We always have to remember when we're interacting with architecture, with the acoustics of a place, even if you're outdoors, the landscape, all those things affect. We're sensorial beings, and we're just there to be taken in a special enhanced perception, right? So what I'm saying is, there's the new avenue, which is also um, there and might be explored even more as we progress. Right? It's the internet. This right here, where we're talking. There. I mean, is there some room for that? There's some experiments now. There's some things that have been tried. Some of it is more gimmicky. Some of it is more sort of okay and worth sort of trying to continue. But that's the nature of what we do. It's always has been. We've always been somewhat technological. I mean, the many of the instruments that we play now are they follow the laws of nature, survival of the fittest in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Since we don't have big departments of the arpeggione or other those kinds of instruments that we know about, there's some around, but these kinds of multimedia explorations, just trying to immersive things, different formats are. I think we should always have some space for that, and from there, some of it starts to crystallize more and more, and some of it might become more of the main thing.
So yeah, I mean, your comments then also sort of are looking forward now, and that actually brings me to my last question, which is, where do you see things going now with, especially with new music and with how audiences interact with new music in the orchestra space? How is Do you see more and more new music being accepted by audiences? I mean, obviously we have an incredible canon of the past as well, but there is also the issue of how many times can you perform the Jupiter Symphony, as much as I love Mozart. But maybe could you speak to, where do you see the field going with respect to the balance of new and old?
Well, I will. I would rather answer that less of like an observer, like when you're watching a documentary filmmakers when they go to nature and they don't interact, they just capture it and sort of, oh look, the lion is eating that cub and we're just gonna watch it. It's sort of tragic, but it's part of a natural phenomenon. We don't interfere. I like to interfere a lot. I mean, because that's I consider this what we do is part of our society. I am as much audience as I am the professional in the field. And what I'm getting at is that there's I think the education in a way it's one of the keys to where this all goes. It's what will ultimately preserve the canon. You got to teach it, but also the craft. That's why I was saying this, because where do I see it going? It's exactly where I want to take it, through action myself, and just it's what I admire. It's what I think it's obviously what audiences tend to like the most also, which is this. I think we're in a way entering an era of, it's like a new Baroque sort of, and I think this is important because this is where the composition really it's a living thing, much more relevant now than ever. Um, the sounds of today have to be have to be documented in a way. The impressions of our emotions as we feel things now, they have to be on some sort of page, for us to to reevaluate, and for others later down the path to explore. Um, so what I mean by the Baroque is the fact that yes, I mean, I feel somewhere in the 20th century we over-industrialized ourselves too much, so that it was like you're a violinist, you are a conductor, you are a composer, you know, and sort of, and then it became like you're a contemporary violinist, you're a Baroque violinist, you're a, you know, it's all these labels and sort of sub brackets, which I get. People do have different passions, but I'm a generalist, and I think many of um, some of the composers of that Baroque era were kind of hands-on kind of people, you know, like Corelli and like take for example Italian Baroque, you know, Vivaldi, Corelli, right? They all played. Paganini, you know, you play, and then you're like, okay, I'm discovering things here. Look at all the great composers of the past. They were great performers.
Mm-hmm.
They were great violinists, great cellists. I mean, a lot of these methods or caprices that one plays, they were written by those who were playing them. You know, conducting, the craft of conducting was literally invented by composers. Like, you know, Berlioz, Mendelssohn. I mean, those were like they after many trials and one dead composer, Lully, trying,
Yes.
you know, with the stick. Then you have we arrive at this craft, this weird craft of conducting, but it comes from composers trying to find ways to make the sound sort of organized enough that people can make sense of it. So I think now, and that's why I was mentioning earlier, you know, people like Maestro Salonen, but look, I mean, I like that John Adams conducts his things there, yeah, here and there. Thomas Adès does that too. I know many don't, but you know, maybe play their instruments, and from there you get great creativity. So I think we gotta come at it with everything. I mean, there shouldn't be the one way or the two ways. I mean, I think that I believe in the individuals. I think that ultimately it's that balance between the social element and the individual sort of freedom,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of sense of liberty and liberating thing that comes from a great performance. And that happens when that happens the right way. You know, it's happening both at the composer level, at the conducting level, from stage and the audience.
Yes.
We're all one there. So new music now has to be about encouraging, not looking just for the little space, for the, you know, sort of like the, you know, like the quota overture, and then now we're gonna go to the picture. I'm trying now. I mean, I am wanting, and I'm trying to do so through my programming, to include more substantial, more time, more time allotment within a program to a new voice. I think many of the composers nowadays have gone through a process of really sort of trying to figure out, like, wait, but you know, I want to make music for my audience, for my community, or for, you know, and I think that's where things are going, and that where they ought to keep going. And it's I love the fact that now we see a more diverse pool
Mm-hmm.
of composers, and because that's sort of this slowly, you know, our you know, classical music. I'm not a big fan of the type of the
Right.
classical, but it's sort of a slow tectonic movement
Yes.
that no matter how you see it, blah blah blah. But look down, when you look at history as a, you know, at a bigger time span, there weren't any orchestras, um, you know, fairly recently, like in all of South America or in other places of the world. Now there are. Now things are coming from there. Now new sounds come
Mm-hmm.
from there. New kinds of cultural interactions with these great instruments, which are universal. I mean, literally. I mean, like a violin is built by pieces of wood and that come from all over the world. Hence, it already belongs to all of us. I'm yeah, I think the diverse pool of musical minds, it's something that I'm very encouraged about, and I think that when people actually get to discover that they see that, well, contemporary music is not what they thought, this kind of scary thing. I think there was a period which is understandable. In the 20th century, there was a lot of trauma, a lot of things, a lot of questioning, just what are we in this for at all? So it makes sense to just completely reject the old and try to go in a but in a way, some of these experiments yielded sort of compositional systems and approaches that are a little bit like Esperanto, you know, the
Yes.
language.
Yeah.
It's a very good, a very good idea. Try to like let's just make something so we all share it from the root level. But we're human beings. We evolved, you know, sort of in this kind of messy, chaotic way. Here we are still,
Yes.
and I think we have to. I think we have to acknowledge that. Ultimately, look, I believe I'm a Pythagorean in this. I think there's an octave. I think there's a fifth. I think there's a, you know, of the harmonic. I think there's something mysterious about that sound that we all interact with. Doesn't matter if you're like African drums or if you're listening to Indian music or something like electronics from the underground in Detroit or Berlin. Doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is from our perspective, individual perspectives. I mean, whatever your path is, where did you go? Who did you meet? What sounds did you hear? Can you translate that into something where others will go, oh, wow? Because that's always been like that, I think.
Yeah, and I mean it's really exciting to hear what you where you think this is going. I mean, and particularly again bringing up the diversity of voices, but also then at the same time, so there may be a diversity of voices, but then there's a universality of what the materials that we're using in the sonic arts. And so and then not just the universality of it, but then the reception in the audience. So the fact that we're still dealing with human brains that and they hear these sounds and then the emotional experiences that come about from all of this. So
and also I just want to point out something, that there's also the diversity of paths, the diversity of how one gets to this place. One should not assume that every classical musician got there through taking lessons like this or like that, or like they went to the conservatory, or that they, you know, there are many ways, and I think there should be more ways for a person to discover what they have in them, and through that's where you get the real stuff. That's I mean, some of the greatest like literary masters or poets or filmmakers, I mean, they all come from different backgrounds, and that's what makes them interesting, right? I mean, the sort of weird way that a Tarantino puts a film together is very different than James Cameron, or like an Argentine film director, or Cuarón, or some, you know, something like from Mexico. Like that's what keeps us, the audience, interested. Yeah. And also it's what helps us identify with the artist, you know, because, you know, maybe there will be some kid from Caracas with the weird life and events that might be, you know, might relate to what I came up with, you know. But at the same time, there might be someone that liked basketball and then from the sport migrate to arts like that. That's also my path. I mean, I have multiple paths that and maybe that's the hook. And the same way, I'm inspired by different people for different reasons, and that's the beauty of it. I think that kind of diversity is very important.
Right. So we're talking about diversity, not just in terms of origins of people, but also in terms of interest and in terms of just physical background and also
the values. Like take, for example, our art form just as the pure substance. You know, there are people with very different values, and I mean, look at politics. Let's not get into politics, please, but just acknowledging that so many polarities. So within music, I mean, I would say, look, I mean, I'm in Alabama, right? I mean, there's an impressive faith community here, and I'm saying, well, like in places like the South, where where faith is a main driver of just what happens in the communities. Well, let's explore composers with deep faith and of Christian backgrounds, and then in other places it might be the opposite. But like the sound, the music here, it's kind of like the text. It's it's like the text can go on something like comedy, or something like some kind of sacred text, or it can be part of like an article about something. And it's music, it's also like that. It's completely plural and universal. And I think we should be as generous as we can with regards to that sort of overall diversity.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really interesting talking with you, and hearing all these wonderful and diverse perspectives just from what you're saying. So thanks again for talking with me.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for doing this for all our musical community.